This video is going to be fun, as I said in the intro, isn't it? Obviously, as you guys know, I've been away the last week. I've been away going to Harry Potter World, which, by the way, was great for anyone who was asking about it. And then, obviously, I've been with my family over the course of, my aunt and uncle and my two cousins, over the course of the last week, because I kind of wanted to just exit the Sunderland bubble a little bit and just enjoy a bit of time away. Even though I did actually watch the Bradford game, I actually got to see it. But this video in general can be attributed to Hannah Brown, actually. So she's watching. Thanks very much for the suggestion. Because we were talking about Giles's video, and obviously I wanted to try and watch the perspectives of, say, Gilesy, Jamsani, obviously STFC Fan TV. I've watched everyone's opinions on this before, trying to make my own video. And instead of saying loudly shouting whether I'm Johnson out or Johnson in, because I will tell you right now, I'm still Johnson in. But I'll give you reasons why later on. And as long as you're civil and respectful towards me and don't come out with stuff like you're delusional if you think this, that, and the other, because I'll lose respect for you if you say that. If you are Johnson out, however, there are concerns that are valid and I can't argue against. And you're entitled to your own opinion, again, as long as everyone's respectful of each other, because not just in football, but across society, we really should be able to be respectful of each other's opinions. I don't know how some people can't get that into their heads. But regardless, anyway. Like, comment, and subscribe, by the way, to get that out of the way if you wish to. This is going to be me waffling on a little bit more than I usually do. So if this is not your cup of tea, feel free to log off the video and go about with the rest of your day. But I wanted to sort of get into the comments about Lee Johnson. And I wanted to sort of talk about the narratives and the comments that have been made in the press and all this other stuff. So I've tried to make some bullet points to try and be a little bit more structured, but I can't guarantee, this channel, I can't guarantee that in any way, shape or form. So anyway, let's get into it. So the first comments, let's get into these comments about the fans first and foremost. So obviously, without getting the comments exactly spot on, I think it was after the Mansfield game, I think Johnson said in the club interview on the club website, on the club's Twitter, that it's difficult for some of the players to, for want of a better phrase, it's difficult for the players to sort of take note of the social media comments, or it was something along the lines of some of the social media posts and comments of some fans get to the players. Now, let's address this straight away. Any sane Sunderland fan would agree with me on this, that if anyone is messaging abuse to these players, that's disgraceful. That is absolutely disgraceful. That is not condoned on any way, shape or form. And yes, I'm tired of this, but that's the norm. It doesn't mean it's right. People have got to get a brain and realise that these people are still human beings. I'm as frustrated as anybody else with with the players, with their recent performances. Truthfully, the Mansfield game, I'm not losing sleep over that. Yes, it's not good enough as a result in the context of Sunderland as a club, but I'm not losing too much sleep over that. We're already into the quarterfinals of the Carabao Cup. We're going to probably go, depending on what team we use, there's a chance we could go far in the Papa Johns. We don't need a third cup run, especially when we're trying to get promoted. It's not a good result, don't get me wrong. If you were there, if you paid your money to go there, you have every right to voice and disagree with me as long as it's respectful. But what I took from it was, if people are messaging abuse towards these players, that is wrong. I strongly go against that. I'm not on board with that at all. However, apparently there was some boos after the Mansfield game, whether it half-time or full-time, and unfortunately, the players going to have to put up with that because, you're losing to Mansfield Town. With the greatest of respect in the world to Mansfield, it's Mansfield at the Stadium of Light. That is a game that Sunderland really shouldn't be losing in the grand scheme of things. But if it's on social media, then I think a lot of these players are still very young. They're still under 23 levels, and they're still going to be naive. In a lot of senses, they're young bairns, basically. They're not going to be, I wouldn't say hardened, but they're not going to be as used to it as seasoned professionals. Like you look at Tom Flanagan or Bailey Wright, or Aidan McGeady as three specific examples where McGeady's in his mid-30s and the other two are pretty much approaching their late 20s, if not their early 30s. So these players are gonna maybe have to have like a course. Like Gilesy made it a point of view spot on in his video when he said that these guys maybe have to have a course in how to deal with social media because, don't engage with it. Don't engage with social media because, you look at the fan forums, you look at all social media stuff, there's going to be some horrible things said. Now, some people I do think go too far, and I think they need to realise they go too far and rein it in. However, criticism is also valid, and these players also can't ignore While at the same time they have to be respected as humans, they do also have to realise that their recent performances haven't been good enough. And the standards, in my opinion, is specifically dropped, but that's a whole different debate for another video. And this kind of leads on to the Alex Pritchard comment when he basically said something along the lines of, it's hard not to hear the noise when people are being negative and all that sort of stuff. And yes, to a degree, I do see where he's coming from. But he also, to be fair to Alex Pritchard, he also said later in the same article that, look, you know, the fans have been great with us. And I know that people could argue, well, he's got to say that. Well, he didn't really have to, did he? He could have just sort of left that comment out of it if he really wasn't that enchanted with the fans, so to speak. He doesn't have to come out and say that, but he still did. So, but I do see how that does annoy some fans, though, to be fair. When you're booing players after an inept performance against Mansfield, who, again, I think are near the bottom end of League 2, or certainly bottom half, in a cup tie where apparently, and again I didn't watch the game, but apparently against Mansfield we got outplayed, especially in the first half. They should have apparently been ahead. Now in which case, yeah, fans have every right to voice their disgruntlement at that. Disgruntlement, is that even a word? I don't know. But, you know, I'm getting quite tired of this fans are the problem narrative. And this kind of goes back to the point where one of the comments, actually, that Lee Johnson, I think it was after the MK Dons away game, he pointed out that the fans got the players over the line. Because obviously we were under the cosh later in that game. We really shouldn't have been, but we weren't under the cosh in that game. And I think the way I interpreted that was that when Sunderland fans are on your side, and it doesn't actually take, contrary to what people like to think, it doesn't actually take that much to get Sunderland fans on your side. If you show the necessary work ethic and application in your game, winning the second balls, winning the 50-50s, sometimes crunching tackles without getting sent off, obviously, you know, fans will love that. Simple as that. Fans will love that and accept it. But at the end of the day, you know, that's how it is. Fans will get on the side. And I want to address again, anyone that says fans are the problem, I always point to the fact that so far this season, and in the first two League One seasons, which was 18-19 and 19-20, each season, you won't, or even if you want to take this season out of it, because there's a good chance we could lose more home games, but if you take the first two League One seasons, we only lost once at home in the league. 18-19 was 5-4 against Coventry, and 19-20 was a 2-1 home defeat to Burton. That aside, in both of those seasons in League One, we were unbeaten at home, with fans in the ground. Last season, when there were fans that were absent from the stadium due to the pandemic, we lost 6 times. MK Dons, Wigan, Plymouth, I've always got this wrong here, Charlton, Blackpool, and there's one more. And I've immediately forgotten it again. It shows you how disorganised, and Portsmouth as well. We lost 6 times last season at home without fans in the stadium. For me, that should dispel the myth once and for all, really. But, and this goes on to it, we need a performance against Ipswich, because let me tell you, if we back off and let Ipswich dictate us and say go 2-0 up after the first 20 minutes, fans will be, that place could turn toxic. And it's not because we're in toxic fan base, it's because we're sick of this league. And I'm one of them. I will never accept the fact that we are in League One. I've acknowledged it. It's a fact. We are in League One. But when I say accept it, I mean I'm never going to be happy with it. It just shouldn't. And this is where Wise Men Say come into it. Their podcast, where Gareth Barker said that, you know, we're 4 years into a 1-year plan to get out of League One, and that's the best way of summing it up. It should not take 4 seasons to get promoted out of League One for Sunderland. And I'm sorry, it just shouldn't. And it's not arrogant. It isn't arrogant. It's just fact. It's not. And at the end of the day, League One as a whole for Sunderland, even though we have to earn the right to promotion, no one's saying we don't have to, but there's nothing wrong for me in saying that League One is not where Sunderland should be. And again, that is just simple fact. For me, Sunderland being in League One is like Everton being in the Championship. If Everton, for example, went down to the Championship, do you honestly think they would think, oh, well, we don't have the right to go up, so we're not going to expect promotion? No, of course they wouldn't. That's just the fact of the matter is. Anyway, and actually, speaking of expectations, this segues onto my next point after about 9.5 minutes. Lee Johnson on the expectations quote. Now, basically, this quote, I can't remember when this was said, but basically, I tried to look at it from his perspective and look at the context, the intended context in which this quote was said. Basically, the comment was, people went into this season not expecting very much. Now, at first glance, when I saw that comment, I was not very happy about that. I was not happy in the manner in which he said. I was not happy because, to me, I interpret that as, what, we don't expect promotion in the 3rd tier? Come on. But when I took back and calmed down a little bit, I tried to look at the context, again, the intended context in which that was said. And I think this is what my interpretation is. I think he meant that at the time when we played Wigan at home, which was at the start of August, there was a lot of discontent about the transfer situation at the club. There's a bit of discontent about the fact this is the 4th season in League One. And people, I think, at that point were thinking, well, we haven't signed many players. We've let a lot of players go. I'm not expecting that much from this season unless we make signings. That's how I interpret it. But if you think differently, comment below and tell me if I'm wrong. However, and I want to quickly read Phil Smith's from the Sunderland Echo. I want to read his opinion on this, and I think this is very interesting. So I'll quickly read these few paragraphs. He said, when asked about this comment, my reading of it was the point he was making to his players that opinions will change a lot over the course of the season. You have to block any noise out and focus on your performance. That specific comment was, I think, referring to the fact that there was some concern in the fortnight before the season, understandable at the time given some of the gaps, over whether the squad was strong enough to compete. He has always said that promotion this season is the aim, and as recently as the Sheffield Wednesday game, that he is still targeting top spot. He knows and has said he accepts entirely that the expectation this season is to finally get the club out of League One. I think it's one of those where it hasn't quite come out as intended. Now, I think I agree with that. But, now that depends. That's what we think. That's what Phil Smith thinks. That's what I think Lee Johnson meant. If he meant that some people went into the club not expecting to get promoted, regardless of the signings, that right there shows the mentality problem. Where while we're in League One, and this is where people on the outside, people at the club, whoever, they are going to have to accept the fact, yes, we're a League One club, but while we're in League One, finishing first or finishing second, any lower than that, unless you win the playoffs, is simply an embarrassing failure. For Sunderland, it is. That's not intended as disrespect to any of the other teams. That's not saying we don't have we have the automatic right to get promotion. Absolutely we don't. And if we went into that attitude with, oh, we have the right to win this because we're Sunderland, chances are we'll get what we deserve, which more times than not will be nothing. That's fair enough. I've got no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is when it seems to be implied that we're not allowed to have expectations because there's other clubs going for promotion, or we don't have a God-given right to go up. That's where I take issue with it. Because just because we don't have the right doesn't mean that it's not a failure if we don't go up, because it absolutely is. And then this brings on to the last point I'm going to try and make, and I'm going to wrap this up, hopefully wrap this up, because I've been on for about nearly 13 minutes at this point. Lee Johnson's streakiness. Now, I said earlier in the video I was Lee Johnson in, and by the way, if you Lee Johnson out, respect your opinion. I think there's a lot of people are starting to... Alright, okay, let me put it this way. I'm Lee Johnson in, but I also acknowledge recent performances, and take Portsmouth out of it, because whether we like to admit it or not, it's not an excuse, but it's a factor that the conditions did play a massive part in that game going the way it did. So even if you take Portsmouth out of it, Rotherham and Sheff Wed are simply unacceptable. There's no way, in my opinion, that Sunderland's squad should be losing either, quite frankly, shouldn't be losing either of those games, let alone getting battered. But both teams deserve the result on the day. I'm not going to take that away from them. But Lee Johnson's streaks. Now, the two stats I want to point out is over the last 2 seasons of Bristol City before he came to Sunderland. I know Jalsey looked at Barnsley and all that, and I'm too lazy for that, so if you want to watch it, go and follow what he says. But the way I looked at it was, in 2018-19, Lee Johnson started the season with 1 loss in the opening 7 league games in the 18-19 championship season with Bristol City. Then after that, in the next 11 games, he won 2 of them, but afterwards then went unbeaten in 13, and I think he won something like 7 or 8 of them. In 1920, which was 2 seasons ago, he lost 3 in his opening 20 games, winning 9 of them. And at that point, after a 2-1 win at Fulham, Bristol City, I think, were level on points with Fulham and were in the playoffs. Then he lost 4 in a row, but afterwards won 6 of the next 8. Now, that for me shows that he can still turn it around. And I do, and maybe this is me being blind, I don't know, but I think Lee Johnson can still turn this around. However, that's not unconditional. If the next few games, if we get battered off Ipswich, and I mean get outplayed by Ipswich, and quite frankly, if we lose against Ipswich, then afterwards you've got Shrewsbury, Cambridge and Morecambe. If you're looking to get in the top 2, you should be targeting 9 points. Whether we get them or not, that's a different question. But that's what the target should be. If we fail in these next 4 games, then my opinion might very well start to change. Because the fact of the matter, and people have made the argument before that, well, yeah, he could get on a good streak, but how long do we have to wait for that to happen? And at that point, is it too late to save the season? That's a fair argument. Fair enough. But that's just my own opinion. I still kind of believe he can do it. But if you don't believe he can, then fair enough, that's your opinion. And at the end of the day, what we have to remember to wrap this video up is we all want the same thing. We all want Sunderland to be successful. We want Sunderland to be forever shot of League One, get into the Championship and then start looking upwards and hopefully never having to think about League One ever again. But obviously at the minute, the morale's low. It's going to be the case. I do think some fans tend to overreact a little too much to a defeat. Some, like the Charlton game, for example, I think some, not many to be fair, but some fans I did think reacted a little too extremely. But Rotherham and Sheff Wed had every right to react the way they did. And again, it's just desperation. We're all sick of League One. And that's fair enough. We're all sick of League One. We shouldn't be down here. With the greatest of respect to the teams of this league. And it's not just us, it's Ipswich, Portsmouth, Charlton, Sheffield Wednesday, the works. And there's a couple of other ones that I'm forgetting. Bolton, there's another one. Wigan shouldn't be associated with this division. But especially Sunderland, given the history, the fan base, everything. And yes, that doesn't get you promotion, but it provides context for expectations. We all want the same thing. And whether you're Lee Johnson in or Lee Johnson out, we'll wait and see what happens. If Lee Johnson continues to struggle in these next few games, then his position might very well be untenable with a large section of the fan base. Whether you Lee Johnson in or Lee Johnson out, comment below. And again, as long as you're civil and respectful, I have no problem with you disagreeing with me. I've just tried to offer my own thoughts and waste 16 minutes of your time. Jam Sarni and Jalsy, for example, and Fan TV, they articulate their opinions probably much better than I did, but I wanted to just sort of get my thoughts out there and see what you guys think. I'll love you and leave you there, guys. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next week after the Ipswich game where hopefully it's a win, but you never know with Sunderland. Take care.